Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second Business Brilliance Podcast. And today I am joined here with a very, very special guest, the Chief Knowledge Officer of NASA, Jim Rostohar. Today, we're going to dive deep into his educational background, what he does as the Chief Knowledge Officer at NASA, and where he believes the future of space travel and space and everything in regards to where we will be outside of this planet and what we see outside of this planet will be discussed on today's podcast. So, hope you guys are ready for this very, very insightful, intriguing, high level conversation with Mr. Rostohar. And Jim, thank you for joining me today.
Shane, it's a pleasure to be with you. I look forward to it.
Awesome, awesome. So, as we get into the podcast, I want to ask you first, can you give us a little bit of background into how you got to be the Chief Knowledge Officer of NASA and what is your upbringing?
Okay, well, let me start with my upbringing because that'll kind of bring us on a trail to here. So I was born and raised in upstate New York in a very rural, actually kind of a poor county. However, people say, "Where are you from?" I say, if you know Albany, where the state capital is, and Binghamton, right in the middle. And when people don't know that, I say, if you've heard of Cooperstown, where the Baseball Hall of Fame is, I tell them I have a certificate in Cooperstown. And they say, "Oh, you played ball." And I say, "No, I was born in the hospital in Cooperstown, New York. So I have a birth certificate there." Anyway, small town that I grew up in, small school. My dad was a self-employed plumbing and heating contractor. And when I say self-employed, he was the only employee. And he had his first heart attack at age 40. And so it became very difficult for my family. And my mom had to go to work in the school as a audiovisual aide just to get some kind of income coming in, not much, as my dad recovered and eventually was able to go back to work. But because of that meager upbringing, I knew I was never going to be able to go to college. They couldn't afford it. I couldn't even ask them. But as other kids were bringing home college brochures and booklets and stuff, I would bring them home too and dream, but I knew I would never be able to go. So I decided to join the United States Navy. And it's because of the United States Navy that I was able to go to college and get a bachelor's degree in communications. And then later, I came to NASA. The rest of my veterans VA loan and also some help from a scholarship from NASA got me a master's degree from Seton Hall University. So in strategic communications and leadership. And so I credit everything to the Navy for helping me get to where I am. But you said, how did I get here? Well, that's the early part. So then I did 25 years active duty in the Navy. Then I retired from the Navy. I went back to work for the Navy as a civil servant. And what I used to say is same job, different clothes. And so then I did that for about a year and a half. And an old Navy buddy told me about this job here in Houston at Johnson Space Center. And I applied and somehow I was selected, and I've been here since 2004. I came up as a communications lead, then became a division chief, ultimately the communications director. And then I was asked, "Hey, would you be interested in coming over to KM?" Because our chief knowledge officer was retiring. And I said, "Well, I'll try it." Did it for 6 months, fell in love with it. And I've been here since 2017 as the JSC chief knowledge officer. That was a long-winded answer, Shane. I'm sorry.
No worries at all. I think it's super, super insightful and a very, very interesting journey to say the least. I mean, from having no opportunities to really get into college and then going into the Navy for, a few decades and then, coming out of that to get into the position, to get yourself into the position of where you are now is very, very impressive. And, I can't help but wonder, Jim, have you always been interested in space, or is this something that, you just ended up taking on because you felt that it was a great opportunity to learn?
Well, I'll be honest with you. No, I wasn't always interested in space. I was always interested in radio and television broadcasting, which is what I did in the Navy, journalism, public affairs, public speaking, that kind of stuff. That's what I did for the Navy. That's what I got recruited to do for NASA. And so I always say, NASA is cool, and I've learned so much and have such a higher respect for it than when I walked in the door. But I came here to do communication. I could do communication anywhere, for anything to talk about or sell or market just about anything. But to be able to do it for one of the coolest outfits there is, now that's what made it all great.
Yeah, and you've always been interested in communicate things that deal with communication. Why is that? Why are you so interested in communication and helping others figure out what information needs to be conveyed?
Well, there's a couple different kinds of communications that I've been involved in. Strategic communications where you have a message that you want to get out. I mean, corporations do this all the time, whether it be for a product or service or what have you. But the area that I willingly or unwillingly through the Navy found myself kind of specializing in is crisis communications. So when you have a bad day, no matter if it's in space or on the ground or wherever you are in whatever discipline you may be, there's always got to be the guy or the gal who you go to. You want to be the go-to guy or gal that they call on, who can compartmentalize the issue, dissect it, come up with a plan and execute it, while other people around you are falling apart. So I was that guy, and that's not to put any light on me. It's just that's what my training was, and I enjoyed it.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I think, being that guy who everybody looks towards to have all of the knowledge is, essentially what you're at NASA for, right? It's, you're the chief knowledge officer. So I'm curious, how does NASA leverage communication to make sure that everybody has the adequate information to carry out the tasks that they need to?
Well, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey to get there, if that's okay.
Sure.
One thing is that in the early 2000s, NASA didn't have a KM program, didn't have knowledge management. It was still, kind of new at that time. Certainly for the federal government, companies had been doing it, but we had something called the NASA Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, and they come in and they kind of audit what NASA's doing in all kinds of different disciplines. And when they looked at the way that we were sharing knowledge and lessons learned and stuff, they said, and this is a quote out of their report. They said, some aspects of what NASA's doing are like storytelling around a campfire. Instead, a modern digitally accessible retrievable information system should be put in place. Things like formal knowledge capture, lessons learned. They said modern tools exist and NASA should avail itself of them. So off we went. It was before I was in this job, but there are 10 NASA centers. And so they said each center should have a CKO and one at headquarters. And you should develop a knowledge strategy that includes things like stories, telling, sharing, case studies, lessons learned, and so on. And then you do it in a federated approach. And what's meant by that is everybody has the same portfolio that they're responsible for, but you also have the freedom to specialize in an area. So we have one center who does all the stuff in the portfolio like we do, but they are a specialist in case studies. Another one is a specialist in lessons learned. And we happen to be a specialized in data science. So we get into visualization, slicing and dicing data. As you can imagine, we've got over 60 years of data, and it's quite daunting. So we have to, and we don't have a large staff, so we have to use some of the tools that we have to become a force multiplier.
Jim, I'm curious, with your job, you focus a lot on knowledge management. And, we've heard a lot so far about how you go about managing a lot of the knowledge and how, you find a lot of what other people learn very, very inspiring and helpful to your own journey. But, within that, there surely is a lot of challenges that you face with knowledge management, given that it is a more new topic that is more important than ever. So I'm curious, what challenges do you face as the chief knowledge officer in managing knowledge, and how do you overcome them?
Well, Shane, I would say, one of our biggest problems is silos. These are people don't want to open up their data to everybody. They want to keep it close. They're probably a little less hesitant if it's a good thing, if they've done something great, and that's okay. and we'll take that. But the nuggets that we're looking for are the things that didn't go okay, so that we can learn from them. Because like I've said before, the optimum word in knowledge sharing is sharing. And if you don't share it, it's useless. No one's going to benefit from it. And there are great lessons in procedures, in hardware, and software that people have done things, and they made things better from a failure that they've had in the past. So that's one of the big challenges, and getting that word out and getting people to understand that we're not going to share your data if it's proprietary or if it needs to be protected. We have ways to do that, but just share it and let other people's learn from your mistakes and your triumphs. But don't keep it to yourself. We have a big effort in trying to do that, and we do that through, like, we'll sit down and have brown bag lunches. We'll do different face-to-face kind of meetings and things, and storytelling, really just to get people to lower their shields, you know and let us see you and let us understand where you're coming from. And I think normally, once people have that interaction with us, things go much better, and they trust us and they understand what we're trying to do. But a lot of people, as you say, it's not um it's not at first on their mind to think about, how can I save this and share this so somebody else can use it. It's, I want to get my project done. I want to do it under budget and on time. So, those are things that we're still working on every day.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, what you said about failure and how failure really is just an opportunity for learning and growth and succeeding. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your perception of failure and how important it is to be resilient.
Well, yeah, I tell my folks, space flight is hard. First of all, it's not easy, and there's lots of failures to get us to where we want to be, or where we've been, or where we're going to go. Um, but I tell my folks in my office, look, space flight, we have to be careful, because we we can kill people. So that's really important we get it right. But in my office, the work that we do in KM is not going to kill anyone. So it's okay to make a mistake. Let's just not make it 17 times. Let's take the mistake, and let's share it amongst each other, and let's all get better. Let's all benefit from it, not just hold it in a file cabinet somewhere, or in a hard drive somewhere. Then no one gets this, never sees the light of day.
I'm curious, how has NASA started to use a lot of technology to advance its operations, and how have you in the knowledge sharing department been a component into, helping increase our technological output?
Yeah, well, I think NASA has been using it for a while, particularly in long distance, i.e., people on the ground, whether they be flight surgeons doing telemedicine with the folks on the ISS, or in some cases, the 3D printing. They may print a new part, or they may print a new tool on orbit, and that's been done. And then the other thing too is, I think that you know, people are being able to use, like, virtual reality to look over people's shoulders to help them and watch them as they're going through a procedure. I mean, a technical procedure. Or I've even seen, this is not a NASA example, but I've seen where the car industry, where people are working on engines, and somebody in another state is helping them through how to do it. We're doing the same thing on orbit, because it's a complicated machine. It's a complex piece of technology up there, the International Space Station, and of course all the rockets that go, both commercial and NASA, to and from. Um, they need maintenance. They need things done to them. So technology helps in that way, and I think technology will push us to be a little bit more agile, which is good, and a little bit more innovative. And it'll develop ways for us to interface quickly with AI. Um, I think the challenge even today is the fact that we have to find ways to interconnect our analog world with the speed, the depth, and the volume of AI. Even in dabbling as we have, It's things are moving quickly. There's not a cookie cutter or a standard. Everybody's got their own version of AI. So it's like, hang on, because we're going to the races here. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the days before the internet and when the internet first came in and then it exploded. I think we're in the same kind of explosion time frame, only this one will probably go 10 times faster because it's doing it for itself. It's learning on its own knowledge. So I think we're going to be a big player in it. I think knowledge management is has to be a big player in it. The other thing too is, like I said before, we have 60 years of data, and this is going to allow us to crunch and munch and visualize data in ways that we can't now, or we haven't even thought of yet. So we're excited about it. We are cautiously optimistic because the other thing is, when you're in a federal agency, they typically make rules. It's like AI is like the wild wild west right now, but we can't operate that way. We have to make sure that our data is secure and taken care of the right way. So there'll be some middle ground that we'll find, and it'll be fine. We're looking forward to it, though.
Yeah, it definitely sounds super, super interesting and intriguing to say the least. And, I think one thing that's super, super interesting is that just how it was back in the day when, JFK was president, we were trying to get men on the moon. There was, a term coined, the space race. But now I feel like within society, there's a tech race, not just as a whole, but there's a tech race within each specific industry to build out the best technology to put yourself ahead of your competitors. And, I think the same thing is occurring within space-based companies, but with NASA, as you mentioned, it's a federal agency. And so how does NASA view competitors like, SpaceX or Boeing, or do you guys view them as competitors or as opportunities to grow your own capabilities?
No, that's an interesting question, Shane. We get that all the time, and we got that even more after the shuttle was retired in 2011. Everybody said, "Oh, well, guess you're going out of business." Well, no. What NASA did at that point is it created all these partnerships. So we gave seed money to SpaceX and to Sierra Nevada and to Boeing to build the partnerships so that they can take our cargo and our crews to and from the International Space Station. The idea there was to take the low Earth orbit burden off of NASA so that we could spend our money to go further, to make plans to go back to the moon and on to Mars and beyond. Can't do it on the budget we have, can't do it all. So we had to strategically make some partnerships, if you will, so that some of that work could be done for us. We could contract some of that work and we could partner. So now SpaceX goes off and does other work, and we highly endorse that. I mean, you can see that they're launching these small satellites almost daily. And Sierra Nevada is taking some tourists up, and you've got Virgin Galactic, and you've got all these other, you know, and NASA is excited about that because it only the more of this kind of competition between companies, the better the product gets, the safer the product gets. And but we don't see any of those guys as competitors. We see them as colleagues, we see them as partners, and they are doing important work for us.
Yeah, amazing. And one would think that there is a lot of competition in a field like space exploration. It turns to be, quite opposite based off of everything that you're saying. And with that, and out of curiosity, with the knowledge that you have of NASA and their operations and things of that sort, why haven't we sent somebody to the moon as of late?
Well, the only thing I can, it's frustrating to us too. The only thing that I can say is that one of the problems as a federal agency is there's no continuity when you have administration changes. When one administration is pro space, the other one is less pro space, or this administration wants to put its stamp and redo everything and cancel the previous one, and then the next one does the exact opposite. There's no continuity, so it's very difficult. Space travel and space any strategic space travel takes long-term planning. You can't just change horses every 4 years or 8 years. It's just impossible. And so that's unfortunately what NASA has suffered from, is the lack of continuity across not agency, across administrations. Um, there was talk a few years back of making the term for the NASA administrator a 10-year term, much like the FBI director, although lately we've seen those change. But um, if we had a 10-year term, that would span at least, let's say you had a president that was 4 years and then he got reelected, that's 8 years. It would at least span you into the next administration beyond that. And if things changed over 4 years, there would be at least the continuity to be able to do these hard things that take time, planning, and strategy. That frustrates everybody. Yes, I wish we were back there now. It seems like we work really hard, but budgets get cut, priorities get changed, and here we are.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it's not going to be like, say, the last time that you guys would have ever sent anybody to the moon. And I'm sure, like, obviously, the chapter for space exploration for a company like NASA is never really going to end, right? Like, that's the entire purpose. And with that, I'm curious to hear what your insights are now on, say, the future of space exploration, right? Like, I asked you, why hadn't we seen anybody in the moon as of late? What are your insights into the future of, say, putting somebody back on the moon and maybe even, say, putting somebody on Mars as well?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Shane. Um, you know, NASA's future, uh, I think, will be continue to be a story of human exploration, technology, and science. That's kind of our core business, if you will. We'll go back to the moon and we'll learn more about what it will take to support human exploration as we go on to Mars and beyond. But you referred to this earlier, but unlike, the 60s space race, we're not racing against a competitor this time. Rather, we're building a community of industrial, international, and academic partnerships. And as we talked about a minute ago, commercial companies are going to play a huge role in this. They'll be launching rockets and satellites and transporting cargo and crew like they do now, and building infrastructure in low Earth orbit. There'll be more space stations. There'll be, NASA's going to be building something on the backside of the moon, dark side of the moon, cislunar space, we call it, called Gateway, and that will be the launching pad to go up. We'll go to Gateway and then go up and down from Gateway, and then we'll go back and forth to Gateway, rather than the 60s where we went direct to the moon. This will be a floating kind of a transportation hub, we'll call it. I mean, that's not the technical term, but you get it. But, so NASA will continue to be a global leader in scientific discovery because the way I put it is we explore, we discover, and we understand. That's really what we're about.
Based off of, your knowledge management expertise and all of the things of that sort, how do you view the future of your role impacting the future of NASA?
Yeah, well, I want to go back one thing though. Before, I think that as we think about going forward, we are not, we can't be forever a one planet species. We have to explore. Not for you and I, we'll be long gone, but for the future of our species, if you will, we we will eventually drain the resources on this planet. It's going to take a while, but it's going to happen. So if we don't explore and find new ways to live and work in other places, we're going to be in trouble. So, you know, ref, refresh the question since I went rambling on you. I'm sorry.
No worries. I think it was a very, very important point that we will circle back to because I do have a question about that. But my question is how do you view your role impacting the future of NASA?
Well, somebody asked me this a while back, and I said, for for 60 years, NASA has data that includes hardware and software and procedures and processes and systems, successes and failures. We're just now getting people to realize the richness and value of this information. And my hope is that one day when we're standing on Mars, NASA will be able to look back and say, we couldn't have done it without our lessons that we learned previously and knowledge management that captured all of them. that would be my proudest day.
Yeah, that's very, very insightful as well. And I think so far, I mean, we've talked about a lot of very, very insightful things in regards to your position and in regards to, NASA as a whole. But, now I want to hear a little bit more about, your ambitions in regards to, your hope for humanity expanding beyond our planet, right? And I want to ask you, Jim, where do you feel like we'll be in regards to space exploration, say within in the next century?
Well, I think we'll have some colonies on the moon. Hopefully, we'll have visited, if not colonized, Mars. But these things go in sequential order. We're going back to the moon so we can mine there where there's some minerals there. There's water we found on the South Pole, and that's kind of where we're aiming to go back to this time. So those things are important to be able to cultivate and be able to build and live and if you will colonize. And that's maybe not the best word. Nobody's going to own the moon, but we're going to be able to harvest things and be able to work from there. All those things that we learn, though, will benefit us as we go to Mars, because at some point, certainly, I would certainly hope within this next 100 years we'll be there as well, and probably doing some similar things there. It's a different environment, it's different gravity. The other thing, just like on the space station, what we're learning there is you have some issues that you got to work through no matter where you are. But the further you go, and especially like to Mars, you got to work on the radiation. Radiation is a huge issue that we are working. Um, People on the space station have shielding. The other thing is you have to be able to grow, especially going to Mars. You have to be able to grow your own food. There's no there's no Walmart, no 7-Eleven on the way, and there's no tanker coming up to fill you up. So you got to grow it yourself. The other thing that we are learning very well right now on space station is the fact that you have to be able to exercise and keep your body in good shape, because it's a long way to Mars. And if you're not able to work out and keep your muscles from atrophy, you're going to get out and be a blob. You'll be jello. So these are important things, and they're doing that. They've got all kinds of resistive training on the space station, treadmill. They have to wear a harness to hold them down, but they have all kinds of they've tried all kinds of innovative ways to work out and to keep your body toned and ready to go. All those are just three. There's other things that we have to get our hands around. But I can tell you honestly, every day here at Johnson Space Center, there are people working on all of those things.
Yeah, and I'm sure they are because, I'm sure that although there isn't necessarily, say, a space race anymore, that NASA still would love to be the one that gets to certain places first and do things bigger and better than, anybody else, right? I think that's the
Sure,
nature of really any
sure.
company.
Because
Oh, go
Shane,
ahead.
the other thing, I'm sorry, the other thing is, you're right. Your point is very well taken. We see China has a space station, have people in orbit. We have India has a strong space program. Um, Lots of other countries. Certainly, we partner with the Europeans, but they also have their own um, space effort, and each country, as well as groups of countries, Brazil, all the way around the world, everybody's getting in the game. And you're right. We want to maintain our leadership of space. It's not about the competition we had in the '60s, but it's really about we want to be able to kind of lead the charge and call the shots, if you will.
Yeah. And, bringing it back just a little bit to, your position and your role in shaping a lot of these things that you envision, I'm sure that, like you said, there's a lot of problems and challenges in regards to space exploration, especially over long distances. Let's see. So, now I'm really, really intrigued to know, what challenges are you currently trying to solve right now in your position that will have an effect on, how we're able to go about space travel?
Well, it really, a lot of it goes back to data capture and search. We use right now a commercial off the shelf product for our KM search, which we've loved. We've used it for about 10 years. Is called Goldfire. We have no we have no partnership, or we are a consumer just like anybody can buy it. We have licenses that we pay for, but it's a cognitive search platform built with artificial intelligence algorithms that helps you, really seamlessly find answers that you need in context, regardless how or where your information is stored. The beauty of that particular system is if you have a database, and there's many, there are many databases here, but if you have a database, we're not going to move your data. We're just going to go and lay over top of it, be able to index it and search it so that we can get the answer that comes back that we need. So one of the biggest issues is search, and one of the ways that we're really working hard on it is that this cognitive search um, system that we use, it's so powerful that when we index databases, and that's the first part of our kind of ongoing problem, is we have to let you have to let me have your data so that I can index it. I'm not going to move it, but I need to let my machine know, okay, here's where it is, here's what it is, and now once it's indexed, it's searchable. So that's a big problem. We're constantly out there kind of being a knowledge evangelist, if you will, and trying to get people to say, hey, let us do that. Once we have it, this this product is so robust that it'll go into thousands of documents, take you down to the top 10, take you to into a 500-page document to the page that has what you're looking for and highlight it. I mean, it's pretty amazing, and we love it, and it's working very well. But again, it's only as strong as the data that you've indexed. So the more that we index, the better our search results will be. So that's a big issue for us right now. But we've proven its value. I have a story. I don't know if you have time for it. It's a
Let's
quick
hear it.
story.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
So Goldfire, this search engine, Orion is the capsule that we are taking our astronauts back on this Space Launch System (SLS). And several years ago, an Orion engineer was racking his head against the wall because they use something called CMUS, or Crew Uprighting Module System. What that is, if you remember seeing any pictures of Apollo, there are these airbags when it's floating in the water. If the capsule goes in upside down, this inflates and turns it up, and it's much easier to get the astronauts out. They can get them out underwater with divers, but it's much harder. Much safer, have them up in the air, and let's get them out. Well, these CMUS bags, to upright the module, they're going to use different ones. Now, the Orion capsule is much bigger than the Apollo, obviously way more advanced avionics and electronics on board. But the theory of what we're trying to do is the same. So this engineer from Orion was racking his head trying to solve a problem, close a knowledge gap of something that he knew was possible during Apollo. He even went so far as to call in what we call graybeards, old retired guys that went up into their attic and they got these old schematics, blew them off, and that helped a little bit, but it still didn't get him where he needed. We sat him down with our KM search tool, and in 2 hours, he had 200 hits of not just hits, but quality hits of what he needed. He started going through them within the first 10. He found what he needed. He closed his knowledge gap, and it was a huge success story. So I go back to him. I wrote a white paper about this. I go back to him and I say, all right, you've seen what this thing can do. What does it mean to you if you couldn't find it this way, or what happens? He goes, well, we would have had to build a test article, probably taken a year or two, and it probably would have cost us $2 to $3 million. So that's one of our success stories of this KM search tool that we are so proud of, because it saved time and money, and it solved a very important you know aerospace problem.
Yeah, that sounds like a super, super useful tool. And I think it's like the fact that you were able to have such a big success story, and I'm sure that's one of many that you have, that is, very, very impressive. And it's very, very reassuring to hear that NASA is working so, so hard to make sure that, not just everybody has the right solutions, but, specific people as well, because those are always very, very important. And so, you know, with you being the chief knowledge officer, again, I'm looking at it now based off of everything that you've told me as, you're the chief leadership officer, right? Like it's up to you to manage a lot of the communication that goes on and to manage it in a way where people are actually inspired to contribute to the mission and the purpose and the vision and the values that, NASA has and that you as a leader have as well. And so now I'm curious, what sort of advice would you start to give students in regards to leadership or in regards to communication so that they can start to succeed and have stories that they can tell as well?
Okay. Look, I will get into the student thing, but before that, I'm going to just give you some general leadership. Some of the things that that I believe in, and some of the things that I don't like so much. I really love a quote from Thomas Paine. He was a guy who was around during the Revolutionary War. He wrote a pamphlet, many pamphlets, but one of them called Common Sense. And his quote was, "Lead, follow, or get out of the way." So I love that because it's so true. Not everybody's a leader, but you can still be a good follower. And if you can't do either of those, let the other guys do what they need to do and step aside. So that's cool. I have one of my own. This will be in my book one day, whenever I write a book. Teach, train, trust, and mentor. Teach somebody to do the job, train them to do it right, trust them to fail and make it better, and then mentor them and mentor others so that they can bring others along as well. So that's just my little thing. Here's some of the things I don't like. We talked about it earlier, groupthink, the Abilene paradox, where, everybody's getting on the train because everybody's getting on the train. Doesn't make it the right thing to do. So, and the other thing, this is another term that I've coined. I have to use my hands for this. Rut dwellers. Guys who have been in a rut and they do it this way because we've always done it this way. Every once in a while, they'll stick their head up, look around, they'll go back in the rut, right? Because you know why? It's comfortable in the rut and it's warm in the rut, and they will never challenge anything or advance anywhere because they would rather have comfort than, you know, move on. The other one that we use a lot around here is, especially with budgets, yes, if, all right? This is one of the things that I think Walt Disney actually came up with. And that the idea there is, don't say no because, say yes if. So if you're coming to me for budget and I'll say, well, if I say no because we don't have the budget, that takes you down one path. If I say yes, if you can show its use case, or yes, if you can allow me to give it to you in increments, or, yes, if. So I like those things. Um, so if I were going to give some tips to students, um, define your objectives and your scope. Don't let things get too big. I've seen this too many times. Take bite-sized chunks. Benchmark successful programs. We still do that all the time. We'll go out to an Exxon or to some other company and benchmark. We went to Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company not long ago, and we learned some stuff from them. They learned some stuff from us, and it's a great opportunity for exchange. Kind of some of the things that I said before. Use some of the quality tools and techniques. Goldfire AI. All these things are there, and they can save you time and energy. Um, Apply data reduction methods. In other words, what I mean by that is edit ruthlessly. Sometimes you have to break things down, you have to take things out. Not everything can make the cut. So, and don't take it personally. Coming from the journalism, public affairs world, communications world, we got edited all the time. If I cried every time I got edited, I would have a puddle on the floor so big we wouldn't be able to, we could probably do the backstroke in it worse than the Olympics. Anyway, visualize and summarize your data, seek feedback and collaboration. Really important. Understand the importance of what you're looking at. And then here's kind of my big four. This is my big four finish. Ready? Ask questions and force discussions. Make make things, make them explain things. And around here we have tons of acronyms. We could talk entire sentences in acronyms. And new people come in and interns come in and they go, What the heck are you talking about?" I always tell my interns, make them explain it to you. Don't let them get away with that. The other thing that I say is challenge everything. Challenge everything. You don't take someone's word that it's correct. Challenge it. Be transparent about your decisions. And finally, include everyone. We're so much stronger together than we are in these silos. Bringing people together, and you would be amazed how ideas and great things can flow.
That is super, super inspiring. And I think that, with everything that you just said, I really, really want to know if, out of all of those pieces of advice that you just listed, what is the one that you would tell yourself that was in college? And how do you feel like he would react to that information?
My younger self, my
Yeah.
younger self needed to ask more questions. You know, you may not believe this, but I'm an introvert. I don't like you go to a cocktail party or something, and it just drains my energy. I would rather be alone doing my thing. But that's not the right answer in business. You can still be an introvert, but ask questions. Make people have those discussions. I wish I would have done that more. And now I do it probably too much. And it's like, oh God, here comes Jim again. But I make them tell me what the heck this is. I sit through a lot of technical meetings. I'm in the Safety and Mission Assurance Directorate. So all the safety and all the technical things on whether it be from spacesuits to rocket engines to whatever. I sit through these heat shields. We just had a big thing on heat shields, and I'm not an engineer, but I take things away that I go back to my search tool. I just did it today, and I searched something they talked about, and I brought them a solution, or at least I brought them the data that they can make the decision. So what I would have said to myself is ask more questions.
Wow. Yeah. And, I think a lot of the times what people do whenever they get advice is, they don't take it more often than not. Right. And I think that, one of the best piece of advice that I've heard is, to take advice that's given to you. Right. I think that's something that can set you very, very far along your path
Yeah.
towards success. And, I think it also goes back to what Jim just said about, make sure you're asking questions, right? Like, don't just blindly take people's advice. Feel free to reach out to people to have them clarify what do they mean and what is the context behind what are they saying, because that is super, super important always and always, right? So, Jim, I want to thank you so, so much for filming this podcast episode with me. And everybody who is watching, please feel free to reach out to Jim if you have any questions about anything, right? I think you would be more than willing to have conversation with you. And I know that moving forward, having Jim as a resource to, touch bases with and say, hey, I thought that in the podcast, I found this very, very interesting. I would love to talk a little bit more about it to pick your brain. I think those things will set you really, really far apart from, the people who aren't doing those things, right? So thank you so much, Jim, for filming this episode with me. And yeah, thank you.
Well, Shane, it's been a pleasure. We got off on all kinds of different subjects and tangents, but I hope it was valuable to you and your viewers. And as you said, I'm happy to talk to or mentor anybody, and I really enjoy doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. I hope everybody watching the video is able to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and hope you are ready for the next podcast and the next videos. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching.